Chelsea, it's so nice to meet
Hi.
you.
Likewise, I'm so excited. I've been looking forward to this conversation for so long.
As have I. Your business is so fascinating and amazing, and you should be so proud of what you've built. My God.
I never really, I'm sure you feel the same. I never really reflect back in that way, but it never hurts to hear. So thank you. I feel like there's a lot of parallels, honestly, in all the amazing work that you guys do too. So I've been very excited.
You really are in the thick of it, right? You are.
As I like as I review first grade teacher emails while I'm waiting, yes, the very much the thick of it all.
Isn't that such an interesting intersection, like with the first grade, teacher parent conference and you're in, growing the business and doing all of the operating at the same time? Like how are you managing through that?
Like any mother, working mother, I should say, I don't think you really ever manage it all equally. I mean, I'm an expert compartmentalizer.
Mhm.
I'm reading Barry Diller's book right now,
Oh,
actually,
it's so
and
good. I read
oh
it.
my god, I
Yeah.
can't put it down. Like, I'm like, "Eric, you're on bedtime for the next 2 weeks until I finish this book," because I started reading it over December break, and I get into bed at, like, 8:30, and I'm like, "Leave me alone, children. I need to finish." But anyway, he talks a lot about compartmentalization, and I really see a
Yeah.
lot of myself in that, and I think, some people call it avoidance. I think of it sometimes as a superpower, but,
Mm.
coupled with this idea that I think the pendulum swings at different phases of life
Mhm.
into different chapters. I've been building this business now for over a decade. In the beginning, it was not a lot of teacher emails. It was a lot of missed Mother's Day shows. For whatever reason, they always happen at the same time as our Target and Walmart line reviews. But a decade in, I feel that the pendulum has swung. I have
Mm.
a big team now. I have resources that I didn't necessarily have when we were first starting out. And I'm sure you feel the same. It's different.
Mm.
Unlike a book, the page flip into a new chapter is not as clean.
Yeah.
Right? So I still find myself kind of dancing between, but I've helped work through that by kind of figuring out what my priority is at the moment. And if
Mm.
it was starting the business, it was starting the business. And I kind of had to relegate certain other
Mhm.
aspects of my identity to kind of fall in line. And there was a lot of guilt wrapped up in that over the years, but not anymore. I've worked through that. I'm sure you feel the same.
Yeah, I mean, how are you or how were you kind to yourself during those moments where you felt like I'm choosing my business today over being at a soccer game?
Getting comfortable identifying the chapter that I was in very early on and dealing with the trade-offs and the ramifications that came with it
Mm.
was the best resource that I ever armed myself with, honestly. And there were a lot of trade-offs, right? There were fading friendships. There
Mm.
were, you know, missed games.
Mhm.
I had to kind of tune out the noise. I think there wasn't as much judgment as there was in my head.
Mm.
If I was thinking about a moment in time where I felt judged or less than, I think it was more a construct of my own guilt than anything else. And now, looking back, I feel very vindicated in some of the trade offs that I made, honestly, because I built Frida at a time when I'm still very much building, but I started it at a time when my children's needs were very fundamental, or at least that's what I told myself, sort of as a tool, right? It didn't necessarily matter who was putting the bottle in their mouth. It didn't necessarily matter maybe who was putting them down in the crib for a nap. I felt more comfortable delegating those tasks, which got me comfortable prioritizing work at the time. And
Interesting.
as you know, probably even more than I do, now navigating middle school and to the emotional parenthood, the needs are not as fundamental. They're much more heady and dynamic. And I don't feel that those types
Yeah,
of
they can't be
experiences are,
outsourced in
it
the same way,
cannot,
yeah.
there is no one you can hire to
Mhm.
handle and work through feeling left out or figuring out, how to juggle a school trip with a water polo tournament, whatever it is. Like
Yeah.
working through those things, it's just not delegatable, and there are
Mm.
some tools that I've honed along the way for how to work through when you can't delegate something, or, you know, when you can't extend sort of timelines that help you work through that. But I don't, I look at some of my friends who are building businesses at this stage of parenthood, and I don't envy them. And I genuinely don't think I would have been as successful where I'm starting now, because
Mhm.
I think it would have been harder for me to define what chapter to prioritize. It was really a lot easier to delegate back then.
I have more to say on that, but
So
I
so
wanna
much.
just I know, but I just wanna frame the conversation around what you have actually built and what you're building, and ground the audience, if they don't know, which I'm sure most people do, about Frida and, just a little bit about the founder story. And I also want to ask you about, you, of course, you have your fertility, then your baby, then your mom care, and so I want to ask you also about like roadmaps into teen, or if you're staying, with
Oh,
baby, because
yes.
it's I
Here we come. Here we come.
right, it's so interesting, like as mother founders, like our stage of life, I think is so critical for informing, it's like a goop now. Now, we're talking about
Menopause.
perimenopause all the
Yep.
time because,
You
that's where I am. So will you tell me a little bit about how your founder story, why you left law, a career in law, to start Frida, and what problem you were solving at the time for yourself and then for your customers?
Yes, I love that you start there. And I really did mean it when I say I wanna thank you, because not as many women are equally as committed to really lifting the veil and having the hard conversations. And I think some of the hardest moments in life that we have solved for, whether it's childbirth, conception support, you miscarriage, and all the other major life transitions. They're not hard because they're painful, although some of them are physically painful. I think they're hard because we don't have the language or the permission or the
Yeah.
tools in some cases for the in between moments. You know what I mean? And so that's really where Frida steps in. But as far as why I left a career that was a very straight path to all the things that I wanted, I definitely was not born for this. I was actually fairly risk averse growing up. I still consider myself risk averse, although some people looking out may think that that's odd. I was raised by a mom who gave up her career very early to support my father's professional aspirations. And so she wasn't necessarily financially contributing. She used competency as her currency in our family. And despite that, for whatever reason, financial independence for my sister and I was a non negotiable. Like, I was working when I was 14, literally walked to the candy store in my town after middle school, 3 days a week from 3 to 5. Right. And that's kind of the sandbox of professional ambition that I grew up in. My dad started his own practice. He was a dermatologist. She helped him run the business. And so when I graduated college, I wasn't going to be a doctor. I left that for my sister. She ended up becoming a dermatologist. I wasn't good at that stuff. The most traditional outcome that I could control in the form of sort of a graduate school next step felt like law school. Um, Went through law school. I met my husband, worked in a white shoe law firm, as one does or aspires to when they graduate. And then the first sort of deviation out of that traditional path was when we moved to Miami. And we moved for an opportunity that Eric had. And I ultimately took a role down here as in-house counsel for the Miami Marlins. I had worked for the Mets while I was in New York for a little bit during law school, and I had sort of burnt out of some of the more corporate law firm type of work that I was doing in New York. So I was really excited to try something new, but still like very clear path ahead. There was not a lot of uncertainty, not a lot of variability in the outcomes. And they asked me once I got there to help build out their non-baseball revenue work stream. All of the revenue that was coming into the organization and the team outside of the 82 days a year that they played baseball. It was a brand new facility. I was super excited. It was like the first time I had dipped my toe in the entrepreneurial waters, but with this big organization as my backstop, right? So I could always still clearly see what was ahead. Then I got pregnant, and motherhood was the first time, honestly, where my obsession with controlling for all the outcomes completely collapsed. Right? Like there was no amount of perfectionism that could manifest a perfect outcome at 2 in the
Yep.
morning, the diaper blowout. It just was not fitting into the box, square peg, round hole. Um, and I was a preparer, right? Like I read every book, I bought every product that you should buy. And for whatever reason, I still felt very ill equipped to navigate whatever the task at hand was. And it was around that same time, 2012, 2013, where social media, particularly Instagram, was rising. And it was this curated, very aspirational, picture perfect parenthood that I was being served. And it
Mm.
was very distinct from my reality, right? Like I was not, as much as I wanted to be, walking down Madison Avenue with my like perfect pram and the cashmere onesie, cheersing my BFF with a perfect matcha latte. It just, I didn't understand the disparity. And you know, my reality was 2 in the morning feedings, pumping, sleeping husband. Like, where was that version? That gap between that version of parenthood and the reality that I was experiencing made me feel like a total failure. And I think looking back, that was the predicate of, Frida's earliest brand identity.
Right. The sort of like, radical honesty, which like the tone of how you speak, on the website, it's so refreshing. I love that sort of anti-Instagram, hardcore raw reality.
Yeah, and I think that we've made a lot of progress over the last decade, and I think some of that version of those stories are starting to be told. In with a lot of credit to the work that you do, and I think some of the work that we've done in breaking down those barriers and demanding authenticity. But I wasn't always a truth teller. Like I was much more of a people pleaser, right? Like it wasn't until motherhood that I really kind of expected more, and the gloss over everything felt very inefficient. You know what I mean?
I do.
My neighbor at the time left our flagship product in my mailbox. She was selling it out of her garage. And I kind of like, threw it in the back of my nursery drawer.
Which was what?
It was the nose Frida, the snot sucker.
Right.
The original hero product off of which, the entire brand and business has been built. And, fast forward the first few months of motherhood, he got sick for the first time. The hospital bulb syringe that they send you home with never worked. And I used it. For whatever reason, I found it. I, dug it out of the drawer. And it was my first, why didn't anyone tell me this moment of parenthood, right? Like, where was this in what to expect when you're expecting, right? I read the whole book, to even, scratching my head when I got to the chapter on packing your hospital bag and they say, pack a sandwich for your birth coach. I'm like, that feels odd, but okay, let's move on. Right. But I think motherhood, what it does is it really like forces you to find efficiency in everything. And that, this tool, for whatever reason, was the light bulb moment for me. Right. Like I was very frustrated with the current solutions that were available to me in this
Mhm.
category. It was
Right.
a
Across the
sale
board.
out across the board. And this was before the feminine care postpartum line. This was really core baby care.
And so your neighbor had made this product or
No, she was distributing it. She's this lovely Swedish woman. Her pediatrician had recommended it to her in Sweden. It was invented in Sweden by an ENT there, a pediatric ENT. And, her kids were teenagers at the time, and she wasn't really interested in scaling the business beyond. She'd earned a tremendous amount of momentum around this single product. It looked pretty different than how parents know it today, more medically marketed, but had sold it to pediatricians' offices and was starting to get some notoriety. And it was at the same time where my career in sports, the path was becoming a little bit more murky. It became a
Mhm.
little bit of a boys' club. I wanted to start to own more of the revenue generating initiatives, but people were getting very political and carving it out. I wasn't qualified to be the president of the team. And I started to move up the ladder, but I was not breaking through the glass ceiling. And that's where the path kind
Mhm.
of ended. And I started to be tempted by this idea of maybe staying home. I had just had a baby, but then this, fierce financial independence side of me that had been beaten into me when I was young was like on the other shoulder.
So did you acquire the product or acquire a license for it?
So I actually started out by working for her to help her scale the business. Eventually, really wanted to double down the growth, saw a tremendous amount of momentum in the brand I was building in the community we were galvanizing around more authentic storytelling in parenthood.
Mhm.
And they weren't necessarily as interested in investing for scale as I was, which ended up being a great lesson in hindsight. I never really talk about this, but I really learned how to build a business on a shoestring budget.
Yeah.
They wanted to use the growth that the business was generating for other investments and other initiatives. And I said, would you be interested in selling the business to me? At that time, it was one product, just starting, with a second. And so bought the business basically on a paper napkin in her living room, moved out of the garage. Now, hundreds of millions later, it's incredulous to me, honestly.
On that one product?
We had 2 at the time. We had started to promote the same, pediatric group had developed the Windy, which is a little tube that you stick up the baby's tush to relieve gas instantly. But again, like, really anchored in building efficiency into parenthood, right?
Right.
Like, before that product arrived, it was gripe water, and it was a hope and a prayer that it works. And
Wow.
the Nose Frida and the Windy and all these early products that we had started to launch, were built around instant relief, instant results. And as parents, like, there's just no more heroic moment when you can see that result materializing. Um, and
Wow.
so, had worked with her for a few years and eventually bought the business. And so many ways the Frida brand is still predicated on that neighborly, like, word of mom is what we call it,
Right.
right? Be the best friend that no one has, and she was that for me, honestly.
You find this neighbor with the relevant product for your stage of life, you end up acquiring it, and it becomes like the foundational product that Frida then comes out of. So tell me for the next phase, were you really focused on those 2 products, or when did you realize that there was a whole suite of products missing, that you would go back to prenatal, that you would, focus on fertility? Like, when did that idea start to form?
Was really heads down growing the baby care business after we'd bought the first 2 products, and was kind of mapping the innovation plan to the experiences that I was having as a mom on the front lines. Brushing my oldest son's teeth was as hard as brushing my dog's teeth. Like, I had to jam his jaw open and get in there as quick as possible. And so I was really like tackling these one by one, giving him medicine. I mean, the pediatrician sent me home with a syringe. I put it in. It took 3 people, first of all. One was holding his arms down, one was jabbing the medicine into the corner of his cheek, and I still ended up covered in pink. And so, as a new mom, like, the anxiety was suffocating. And so I would start to tackle these one by one. And then I gave birth to my second son. And at that point, I thought I had most of it figured out. The second time around, you kind of know what to expect.
Mhm,
But I
mhm.
vividly remember waking up in the middle of the night. I wanna say it was like 3 or 4 days after I had been released from the hospital and home with him. It was a totally normal labor and delivery. I had prepared perfectly. My hospital bag was packed, and I woke up in the middle of the night. I went to the bathroom just to pee, and I mean, this is gonna be gross, but it's goop, so, here we go.
Exactly. Here we
Right?
go.
I passed a clot the size of a jellyfish, like, right into the toilet. Like, it was so
Yeah.
loud. I was like, what was that?" And I looked, and I had a really great relationship with my OB. I still do to this day. And I texted her, Eric's, of course, fast asleep, the baby's sleeping. Like, I should have just gone right back to bed. This was like a normal trip to pee. And, of course, did not sleep the whole night, thought I was hemorrhaging, just petrified. And I woke up to this text, totally fine, totally normal. I was like, What do you mean?" It was, let me show you a picture of how big it was, right? Like, with my hands. And it was that moment, coupled with a few others reflecting on sort of my in-hospital experience that second time, where I realized that there were a lot of things and experiences in this shift from labor and delivery and pregnancy care to baby care that were being minimized medically and totally sanitized or not even shared culturally,
Mhm.
right? Like, no one was talking about this at all, like, not a single person. Couple that with the fact that we had we had developed some momentum on the baby care side of the business, especially in retail. Like, I had gotten us into Target, I had gotten us into Walmart, but the experience preparing for the hospital was so broken and so fragmented. I was up even from the hospital when I should have been sleeping. Amazon Prime, when that was a thing, sending my dad out to Walgreens where he's like FaceTiming me with wings, without wings. I'm like, I don't know, dad, just get whatever is there. And then, before I even left the hospital, this nurse came in right after I'd given birth. I'll never forget this. And she comes in with a newborn diaper. And I thought it was odd because the baby was in the nursery, right? It wasn't in my room. And she rips open the middle of the diaper. She pours from the little pink hospital pitcher the hospital ice machine ice into the middle of the diaper. She closed the diaper back up and she said, "Here, sit on it." And I was like, "Oh, I guess
Light bulb.
the baby is not the only one leaving in a diaper." And that was really it. And I had developed really great relationships with our suppliers, manufacturers, our retailers, even though that was a journey in and of itself, because there was no mother care category at the time. And so worked really closely with Target to create 8 feet of space on the shelf specifically dedicated to what we eventually called mother care. Um,
Mm.
and that was a battle genuinely just to get it there.
Do other brands sit next to you there now?
Yes, I'm very proud of that actually.
Yeah,
A
that's
lot
I
of
bet
other
you
brands
are.
do. Some people think like, "Oh, there's so much competition, there's so much noise," I'm so proud to have created a category where none existed. I mean, to the point where when we first walked into the Target offices with this beautifully curated line of much better products for postpartum recovery, the team proposed we put them in the feminine care aisle next to the tampons. And we were like, that's kind of broken. She hasn't shopped for tampons in 9 months, and she's not going back anytime soon.
Right.
Let's put them by the diapers. Let's make it a little bit easier. They're like, we don't have any space. This is feminine care. That's where it belongs. And that's when you really have to, you know, start to unpack who's making the decisions. Where can we layer in some intuition here and not
Mm.
just lead with data, right? Okay, I get it. Women go to the feminine care aisle. But ultimately they were good partners. And
Mm. I wanna go back to something you talked about in terms of this total lack of transparency around sharing information and normalizing, these things that we go through when we give birth, Like, I was so shocked by what happened to me. I, of course, had my perfect plan of my natural birth. I ended up, like, with a seizure and a cesarean, emergency cesarean, kinda one nightmare after the other, and I imagine that in earlier generations that there was much more information sharing between women, sisters, mothers, friends. When do you think that broke down culturally, and why?
I actually am not sure it ever broke down because I think that there still very much exists that word of mom. I think if you have the best friend or the sister, which not everyone does, right? I think you're still hearing bits and pieces. And what I mean by that is I think that we're a little scared to tell women the truth because we're nervous that it will scare them. So we sanitize a little of it and share what we think women can tolerate. But I think the reality is being blindsided is what's scary, right? I think we prepare women, whether it's from our moms or from our friends who just went through it, we prepare them for this milestone labor, delivery, right? Here you go. Here's exactly what to expect. Maybe she didn't have the same experience. There's a whole range of outcomes that you have to prepare for. And it's possible that the one person or two people who you heard it from didn't experience it exactly as you did,
Mm,
right? And so I think where I've approached it from is trying to prepare women for the marathon of experiences, not just
mhm,
the moment, right? And I think for people like me who try to control all the outcomes, it's very hard, right?
yeah,
Because, y- you know, preparing for a single outcome is ultimately preparing to fail. You have to prepare for a host of uncertainty. And I think that
mm,
that's where some of it breaks down and unravels. And I think there's also different sources in this day and age where women consume their education and their information. You know, over 90% of women who start their breastfeeding journey start it on social media. They're not asking their mom. First of all, my mom formula fed. Like I got nowhere near her nipple, right? She looked at me like I was crazy. She looked at me like I was crazy when I wanted to breastfeed. That was just their generation's approach.
yeah,
And so when you think about social media, those platforms are systematically and algorithmically not designed to educate women honestly and authentically, which is so
right,
sad because it's in such stark contrast to the way that men's health gets promoted and shown. I mean, really, like we've faced so much rejection in a variety of capacities online, on linear television advertising, social media advertising. So women really don't have a single source of truth or a repository of information. And then this goes beyond postpartum, right? Like
yeah,
I get excited when you talk about new vibrators, or, I'm sure there are women who get excited when you're talking about divorce or, co parenting, whatever the topic is, you can become sort of known for this unabashed truth telling. And that's
mhm.
where, we're trying to step in.
And I love how it touches, it's like in the copy of every product. It's very refreshing. And there was obviously nothing remotely like this when I was having my kids, unfortunately. Um, and there wasn't Instagram and there was barely anything on the internet,
Right.
so it
Yeah, you
was,
have to have the best friend or a mom.
yeah, but still there are certain areas like I love the Frida uncensored part of the site where you have you know, age protected videos of what a perennial massage looks like to prepare for birth. Like, luckily, I was in London at the time and I had, not that it mattered because I ended up in an emergency C section, but, I had a doula who explained to me, how to start to prepare for vaginal birth. It was really incredible to see that on the site.
Yeah. Did you watch the full video?
Yes, I watched everything. I sat there watching all of them.
That one was the farthest I've ever taken it to the line. And I think what we're excellent at is really knowing what's gratuitous and what's not, and really stopping well short of that line.
Yeah.
And really, that entire platform, I get so emotional when I think about it because I think about all of the different major life experiences and physically transformative transitions, whether it's becoming a mother, whether it's getting your period for the first time.
Yeah.
I think about my mom shoving me into a bathroom with a box of tampons and unfolding the instruction manual and trying to figure out which hole it goes in, as if that's even a question, right? Like, but I was 14 and that felt, I guess like a natural way to tackle that experience for her. And so I get excited when I think about our daughters one day
Yeah.
having a place to go that is not limited, whether it's in the visuals or the language or the stories that we tell, that is rooted in science, right? That is portraying a range of outcomes,
Yeah.
especially for those who like to control for one. That's not really scalable. But yeah, uncensored and that website was really built because the systems had totally failed us, right? Like from the beginning, honestly, when
Mhm.
we launched the first 5-step postpartum recovery regimen, we shot the most beautiful 30-second commercial. We had never done that before, ever. And it was something as simple and mundane as following a woman who was getting up in the middle of the night to feed her baby and trying to pee for the first time, not so dissimilar to the experience that I just shared. And okay, so we had this beautiful 30-second spot. We're like, when do we put it on air? And so my husband, who runs the commercial side of the business with me now, said, let's do it during the Oscars. It's the women's Super Bowl, right? We'll get the most eyeballs. This is great. And we all sort of like rallying around this idea. We submit it. No question. We allocated the budget for it, everything. We're locked and loaded. Inbox email comes in. Unfortunately, your commercial's been rejected. We don't allow lewd or indecent content to be shown on this network. There was no nudity. There was nothing inappropriate whatsoever. And we were so upset and disheartened
Wow.
that Eric said, let's just put it on YouTube, right? And let's see what happens. And we added this opening super that explained to the audience that we had greater ambitions than this. And we really wanted to show it on a much broader platform.
But it was censored essentially.
Yeah, correct. We were censored and we were rejected. And that lit a fire in our community that I cannot overstate how much it has
Wow.
triggered as far as progress, like true progress. We worked with the Center for Intimacy Justice to really advocate for changes in the algorithms that allow things like the Girls Gone Wild Instagram feed, but filter us showing what a perineum is. It's the same body part. There's just like a thin strip of fabric covering in one.
Unbelievable.
Fast forward a few years later, we're clearly moving in the right direction. We showed the first ever breastfeeding woman on national television during the Golden Globes a few years ago. So that was exciting progress. We're just not quite there yet. And
Mhm.
so that's where uncensored comes in. And I think, I get asked a lot, like, are you burnt out? Are you tired? Like, how do you keep going a decade in? And I really think that it's experiences like that that
Mm.
continue to motivate me to keep
Mhm.
going.
Let's talk about the sort of addressable roadmap that you could have because, there's as you were touching on before, there's a whole postpartum I think it's like years personally of regaining, rebalancing, uh, your hormones, for some women psychologically, certainly sexually, um, and on and on. There are so many areas you could go into. So how do you think about that? Or do you think about having discipline around product focus? Or do you think like, no, we could really go more laterally into these other categories?
We're very disciplined in how we think about innovation. But at this stage, I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. Forever, this product line has traced my own personal experiences as a mother. And I would have kept going for a fifth, sixth, and seventh child, but I would have had to have found a new husband. And Eric liked to joke, either you're going to have more kids or we're going to have to move on to Frida tween and teen. And
Yeah.
here we are on the precipice of launching a big kid line that is really rooted in my lived experiences every single day as a mom of four.
So what is in that? What is in that product line?
Well, more to come soon.
Okay.
We're launching it actually probably in Amagansett later this year.
Oh, good.
It's rooted in the same insight is that, parents need to resource themselves for every stage of parenthood, whether it's emotional resources or the physical tools. And my toolbox that I created for myself really at Frida is not aging with me, right? So it's the same categorical types of problems. Did you brush your teeth? Did you put shampoo and conditioner? Did you put the shampoo more than just in the front 2 inches of your head? Right? Like, how about can we wash your neck? Right? It's not just like the shoulders and so it's all of those same types of health, wellness, hygiene, grooming. But what does the toolkit need to look like when your kid is 13 and
Mm.
only
Mm.
wants sort of like the llama hair fluff, right? Like, I don't know, you're going to get all of this acne around your hairline. And, that's where I feel very grateful for my dad and my sister's contribution to this line that's coming up. Necessity is the motherhood of invention. And
Yeah.
it's, a saying that's as old as time, but it's so true.
Yeah.
And if I never have to go back into my kid's bathroom and check if the sink is wet to see if they brush their teeth, it will be too soon. I'm
Right.
just done with that. I don't know why it's such a problem. Just brush your teeth. So yes, we are aging up, but
Yeah.
also really at the same time, very intentionally expanding even earlier. So when prospective parents think about conception, that was actually the catalyst for Uncensored.
Yeah, I saw the sperm squeezing,
Yes, yes,
syringe.
yes. At home insemination. Believe it or not, women were using turkey basters at home.
Yeah.
I mean, it was the biggest hack all over the internet. And so we felt like we really needed to, or we had an opportunity to really, one, just like we did on the baby side, make it more efficient and more thoughtful, but two, to educate both men and women, by the way, on how to properly prime your body for conception. I mean,
Mm.
the only education I ever got to that end was in sixth grade health class, where I was taught basically how not to get pregnant. After that, it kind of cliffed. And I was left Googling, what's the best sex position? How many times in my fertile window? Over 70% of girls think that they can get pregnant any time of the month. I mean, we're failing them, really. That's so sad. And waiting is traumatic in and of itself. And conception and that whole period of time as you think about the excitement of becoming a parent. And then it's like, hurry up and wait. It's traumatic. And no one
Yeah.
names it. No one tells you about that middle part of that transition. They think, oh, go get pregnant, and then you'll be pregnant, and then you'll have this glorious glowing pregnancy, and then you'll
Yeah.
prepare for the labor and delivery, and you prepare for that milestone, and then it's on to the next. And so,
Yeah.
the hope is to really like step in and cushion the fall or the transition, really sort of first and foremost explaining that it's not a moment in time. It's
Yeah.
really a season, a chapter, whatever it is. And
Yeah.
you need the tool.
It certainly is a chapter, and that I think it's like for each kid in that sense, it's an 18-year chapter. I mean, with that has like subsets, in every one. It's I really I love how you are thinking about that. Like because we are in such a results oriented culture and society, and I think you're right that there's this public facing image of, pregnancy and childbirth that's very sanitized and very unattainable in a way. And so like the more, and obviously that's, what we try to do at Goop as well, is sort of dispel this idea that things go exactly as planned and will be perfect. And, life is incredibly messy, and nothing highlights that mess more, I think, than when you give birth to your first child. And as you said right in the beginning, it's like you have this idea of how it's going to go. And the depth of letting go that needs to happen and the depth of self-forgiveness that needs to happen, and it's like it's in a way, it's almost like, I said this once to my friends, it's almost like at that point you're birthing into your own real womanhood, because not because you're a mother, but because you have to start framing things as like to be gentle with yourself and to listen to yourself and to, put down these mantles of like, I should be doing this. And
Should.
nothing
Yeah,
does that
it
faster
should.
than having a kid.
It's so true. And I think to the greatest extent, the ability to abandon this concept of being ahead or behind or on track, right?
Yeah.
And just finding yourself in whatever chapter that you're in that's so independent and free from comparison. It's
Mm.
so much easier said than done, right? But these
Yeah.
timelines are not linear, right? Like
No.
they're just really not, especially when it comes to trying for a baby, and all of that. How about bounce back culture, whatever that means, right? Like
No, it's
physically,
really
emotionally, right? Like I should be thinner. I should be back in my jeans by now. I should feel fine, right? And I think
it's so dangerous, I remember thinking that, and then somebody said to me at some point, "You had that baby in your body for 9 months. The fact that you could even think it would take less than 9 months to go back to normal is totally unrealistic," I'm thinking, "Oh, in 8 weeks, I should be back in my jeans."
it's especially true for super ambitious women, right? Who
Ugh, we're
have
so fucked up.
and where it's really debilitating
Yeah,
because
it is.
in every other walk of life up until that point, you were the most capable person. Maybe, second to my mom only, right?
Yeah.
And I think that the biggest disservice that we do to ourselves is we expect this to just happen as opposed to mourning the loss of who we were. And it sounds morbid. And I don't mean you'll never be back to yourself, right? But it's a new version of yourself.
Definitely.
And I think that to the greatest extent possible, and this is not just becoming a mother, right? I felt this when I got married, right? I sometimes just wanted alone time, right? And for all of life's big transitions, giving yourself the freedom to kind of mourn and grieve who you were
Yeah.
is really powerful. And it doesn't mean, because I know, you know, people think, well, I'm supposed to be grateful. I have a healthy baby and I have a great marriage. And I don't think the gratitude has to cancel out the grief. The two can coexist. But
Yeah.
if you don't give yourself the time and the space to grieve the version of you that was and prepare to receive the new you, I think it sets you up for disappointment down the line.
Absolutely true. I always say we have this idea that, life is about crossing finish lines or about doing things certain ways or to keep adding on, but life is, it's like the Buddhists say, right? Like there's a lot of suffering alongside of growth and expansion and joy, and it really is being able to hold all those things at once, I think, that make life the most beautiful and interesting, like acknowledging that the pain is okay. The pain of losing, the incarnation of who you were in your 20s, it's okay to acknowledge that. Like it is sad to lose that.
Also, about our mother's generation, where competency was their armor, but the armor is very heavy to wear, right?
Yeah.
Like they did not have the tools or the language or the permission to be vulnerable. It wasn't seen as a resource like we try and sort of explain that it is now. It was seen as a weakness,
Yeah.
and you're taught, not necessarily even explicitly, just by absorbing what you're seeing, competence is the only way to survive, right? And
Mm.
you have to work through it, and if you're capable enough, you won't need anything. Like I vividly remember coming home from the hospital with my third son. I think it was, now I have four, it's hard to keep track.
You 4 sons?
No, I have three boys and a girl. but
Okay.
the distinct labor and recovery experiences kind of all meld together. But
I
he was my
see.
third. It definitely was my third because he was born in September, and that's when Rosh Hashanah was. But he was born
September what?
September 7th on Eric's birthday because Eric thought it would be great to get one last birthday sex in. And I said, that is what you get. And forever you will have to share your birthday with your son because you couldn't wait a few months until after I had recovered. And I had come home, and it was around the time of Rosh Hashanah. And I typically host all of those holidays. And I was so driven by this obsession with competence and can do, and I can do it, that I decided to host Rosh Hashanah dinner for my whole extended family, like my sister, my brother, my
Jeez.
in-laws. And it was 3 days home, and I sent Eric out to services, and I was, getting everything ready at the house. We were living in a house with a lot of stairs at the time. And I remember like walking upstairs every time I forgot something to get something. And it was so painful, like really different type of pain than my previous two recoveries. And my sister came over, and I said, Alex, you have to look at what's going on down there because something is not right. Something's rubbing, it burns. I can't describe the sensation, but when you know, you know. And we went upstairs to my bedroom, like to the point where I can't even move one foot in front of the other
Oof.
anymore. And she said, oh, one of your stitches is a little too long and it's rubbing against your incision wound. I had an episiotomy. And so I was like, what do I do? It's Rosh Hashanah. Like, I know that my OB is not in. She went out to her car. She's a Mohs surgeon. She got her doctor kit, whatever it was she got. I don't know what she keeps in there. And she, in the middle of Rosh Hashanah dinner, trimmed my stitches. I mean, I can't even believe I'm sharing this right now because
I
I
love it.
wonder what everyone's going to think. And not everyone has a sister for a surgeon, right? So
I was
what do
gonna
you
say.
do?
Yeah.
Right? And so I think it's my mom used to call it the curse of competency. Why did I have to host Rosh Hashanah dinner? I didn't. Nothing would have
Yeah.
happened. I could have been vulnerable for a fleeting moment,
I mean,
but I
that's
wasn't.
insane that you did that, and I'm glad you learned the lesson
It
from
was
it.
dumb. It was not there's no medal won for how many holiday dinners I host. And
No.
that has been a hard lesson to learn.
Mhm.
This balance between complacency and just this like super unrealistic chase for perfection and competence.
Yeah, I've completely tried to, like, turn that upside down now because I was always there, like, "How much can I do?" and "How lovely can it be?" and, on and on and on, and now I'm still learning how to do it because it's like a lifetime of deprogramming, but stopping to think about, like, "Okay, my impulse is to host this holiday meal. Let me really check in with myself and see, like,
Yeah.
do I have the bandwidth to do this, and to make a really self-honoring choice."
I am still honing those skills. I
Me
do not
too.
have them. And I think the greatest misunderstanding is that you're born with that ability and that it's not a learned behavior. It is such a skill that you have to practice like any other skill to be
Yeah,
good at. And I'm like not one for self-help. I hate it. I can't I really just try to avoid investing in myself in that way at all costs. But experiences like that really demonstrate and have
mhm,
kind of honed this approach that I've gotten better at, I will say,
yeah,
where I'm delegating more. And I don't mean delegating because delegating is still in Eve Rodsky's definition doing, right? I'm
right,
delegating ownership holistically.
right, you're letting somebody else really make
Own it.
decisions.
Yes.
Yeah,
And or I'm dropping it all together. Or
right,
I'm
that's nice.
extending my own internal deadlines, right? I'm doing one of those three at least to try and be better. And I think there's just this like emotional liquidity that you need during that phase. You have to be flexible and forgiving with yourself.
Definitely. Okay, with our last few minutes, I wanna move into a rapid fire round.
Ooh, great.
One thing that belongs in every hospital bag.
The upside down Perry bottle, without a doubt. I mean, there is nothing. less dignifying than sticking your hand in the toilet with that ketchup squirt bottle that they give you in the hospital and trying to wash instead of wipe.
I was personally very interested in your icy maxi pad
I use maxi
situation,
pads.
but
They're great, but, there's just
okay.
nothing like a cool rinse after a
Okay.
burning pee.
What is a fertility myth that you wish we would stop repeating?
That it all happens on the same timeline for everyone. Really, like the nonlinear nature of preparing for parenthood. The impulse to compare has to be abandoned.
Something women need from their partner without having to ask.
This is so good. Shared ownership, right? And not just delegation. I think that
Yes.
is the greatest resource that women can arm themselves with from their partner, and actually asking for it in advance of when you need it, not
Mm.
waiting until you send the text like I did even 3 days ago. Why are you at work and I am playing camp counselor to the kids? Like, this wasn't how I envisioned starting the year. It's just too late at that point. You have to
Right.
share, you have to talk about dividing and conquering before you need to divide and conquer.
What's one thing you wish someone told you before becoming a mother?
Being ready is a mirage, and you have to, I think, arm yourself for a range of outcomes and uncertainty, because for people who like to control the outcome in life, motherhood will turn you upside down and inside out.
Well, you talked about this, but a product you created out of personal necessity.
There are 200, where should I start?
Yeah, exactly.
All of them have been born out of, like, I can share, what's amazing is I can share a moment in time story for each of them, and that's why we don't have 3,000 products, right? And
Right.
that's where the discipline comes in. But, like the Medi Frida is my favorite, probably one of my favorites, because I think the anxiety that comes with knowing how much medicine to give a new
Yeah.
baby,
It's hard,
and
it's
it's
slippery.
it's really hard. And so making sure that you can accurately dose without being covered in amoxicillin
Yeah, which hopefully we can avoid anyway, but yes.
still happens.
What do you think that the biggest misconception or the biggest lie women are told about postpartum? Not lie, you know what I mean, like led
Yeah.
to misperceive.
What I was referring to earlier, that these transformational life stages are somewhat stable if you prepare. And
Yeah.
I think that that is a really big misconception. I think women have to prepare to be shaken and
Mhm.
destabilized, right? I think there
Yeah,
is this understanding that, okay, I read the book about the products, I am set. We kind of optimize and plan for the checklist moments, but not the in between. And
yeah,
so I think, you know, we're better off if we prepare to be destabilized during
agree.
these transitions.
One word to describe sex during pregnancy.
Oh, during pregnancy?
Yeah.
It depends on which stage. Oof, let's break it down. First trimester and second trimester, exhilarating, especially second trimester, like really fun, optimal hormonal flow to every possible organ, including your brain and your body. Third trimester, no, like I just want to not be touched. And
No.
the inevitable, like, fourth trimester, and again, this is not just 6 weeks and I'm back to me, right?
No.
Sandpaper, lubricate, practice, be forgiving, talk about it, prepare for it to take longer. They actually analogize the postpartum amount of lubrication to the perimenopausal and
Yeah,
menopausal amount of lubrication. I think that it's the same exact hormone highs and lows that are emulated in your body.
certainly is, confounding. I'll put it that way.
And I would say, really, like, it's a joint effort, right? This is not just about tap me when you're ready, right? This is
Mhm.
about, why don't you get some lube and have it on hand just in case I'm in the mood to try? Be
Right.
prepared for me to say, nope, I'm done. I don't want to try anymore.
Oh, man, yeah. Gosh, you're giving me
Yeah,
flashback to those days.
PTSD. By
Wow.
the way, that's why people have a hard time preparing other women, right? You don't
Yeah,
even wanna think about it. You're
it's true.
you've compartmentalized like the best of them.
Okay, last one, and this might be going back to the first thing you said, which was that compartmentalization is your superpower. But is that a superpower that motherhood unlocked for you, or what is a superpower that motherhood has unlocked for you?
I feel like there are a few.
Okay, great.
I've become much more efficient as a mother. Your frustration tolerance thins, I think, as a mother, and so you really strive to find and eliminate all of the inefficiency in your life, and that has become a superpower. You know, like that family therapist that my mom brought us to, who diagnosed me with frustration intolerance and really nailed it.
Right.
I just think that that has become sort of a very valuable resource for me, is just find the efficiency, whether it's time management or, you know,
Mhm.
planning and organizing and optimizing for the tools that we have or don't have.
Thank you so much for joining me today on the Goop podcast. I really, really, really love talking to you. And I'm just so in awe of your business. And it's so beautiful to see a woman, a mother go into the world, and have this level of success because you are committed to solving the problems of women, pre, postnatal, and now into preteen.
Onward. Well, we couldn't
Onward.
do it without and alongside the Goop truth tellers. So right back at you.
Thank you. You're so sweet.